I'm Sarah Coates, and thanks for joining me for this special edition of i24 News. Chilling words from the successor of the assassinated leader of the Iran's Revolutionary Guards, with Esmail al-Khani saying expect to see dead bodies of Americans all over the Middle East. This is Iran's Supreme National Security Council saying that it has reached a decision on how to respond to Friday's targeted killing of the head of its Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qassem Soleimani, in Iraq, who was one of the most influential figures in the Islamic Republic, although it has not said how it will respond. Now, this as the United States has announced that it will deploy thousands of additional troops to the Middle East as concerns grow over a huge spillover of violence in the region, with many analysts saying that it may be unprecedented. Now, with this assassination plunging the Middle East into uncharted territory, our correspondent Ellie Hockenberg looks at who Soleimani was and what this assassination could lead to.
The living martyr, the chaos agent who roamed the Middle East. Qassem Soleimani was one of the main figures that has shaped Iran and the region in recent years, formulating and orchestrating Tehran's military strategy and activity throughout the Middle East, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Syria and Lebanon. 62-year-old Soleimani has been at the spearhead of the Al-Quds forces since 1998, focusing on how to establish the Revolutionary Guard's interest outside of the country.
He brought successes for the Islamic Republic like no other. You have to remember that Iran fought Iraq for 8 years, a war that cost more than 200,000 Iranian lives and cost somewhere between $100 billion to $400 billion. These are the rates. And Iraq couldn't even get as far as Basra. But now, after the U.S. toppled Saddam Hussein, Iran, with the Quds force, managed to get to Iraq, managed to get to Syria. It's in Lebanon, and it has influence in Yemen at a fraction of the cost. And also, how many Iranians were killed? 1,000? This made him a very, very powerful figure with the supreme leader.
Under Soleimani, pro-Iranian Shiite militias were formed all over the region, one of their main aims targeting American and Israeli targets. His fundamental position and almost mythical status made him a recurrent target for assassinations, including a reported American green light to Israel to target Soleimani in early 2018. In recent years, however, due to his aggressive policies, Soleimani was no stranger to domestic criticism. The funds invested in global terrorism and the demanding Syrian quagmire raised a civil uproar as economic sanctions suffocate Iranians themselves.
Because the IRGC today is involved in so much corruption in Iran, and because the IRGC is seen as taking part in the attacks against the demonstrators. And more importantly, I think it's safe to say, more Iranians want to look at problems inside the country. They were not looking too favorably about what Qassem Soleimani was doing abroad. I don't think there will be that many people in Iran who will be genuinely crying for Qassem Soleimani.
A dissensitive timing as Iran is facing some crucial challenges. The absence of one of its most influential figures will have a ripple effect on the turbulent region as a whole.
Now, the killing of Soleimani was a security decision, but also a political move on President Trump's part, and potentially a very risky one. While receiving unequivocal support from most of his own Republican Party, Democrats, especially in Congress, were more equivocal. Now, after news of the airstrike broke, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi immediately issued a statement saying the administration conducted the strike without authorization for use of military force and without consulting Congress. And for more, let's bring in our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv, standing by in D.C. Dan, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Firstly, tell us, what are the reactions that you're hearing there in Washington?
Well, like everything in this country in recent years, it is divisive depending what political party you identify with. You're right, Republicans are agreeing with the president. Democrats are upset that Congress was not consulted, and Democrats express fears as to what might happen next. President Trump put out a statement that said he meaning Soleimani, of course, should have been taken out many years ago. President Trump said that Soleimani was responsible for the deaths or injuries of thousands of Americans and directly or indirectly the deaths of millions of people in the Middle East. That's a big statement. As for the Democrats, well, former Vice President Joe Biden, one of the leading Democrats running for the White House, put out a statement that said President Trump just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox, and he owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and plan to keep safe our troops, embassy personnel, our people, and our interests, both here at home and abroad, and our partners throughout the region and beyond. Democrats are saying that Israel and Saudi Arabia, for instance, could be targets for retaliation. Another Democrat who's running for the White House nomination, Senator Elizabeth Warren, said Donald Trump is dangerous and reckless. He has escalated crises and betrayed our partners. So Democrats think that Donald Trump had no good reason for this attack. Frankly, we're waiting to hear directly from Mr. Trump himself. He may well be speaking on Friday evening as part of a speech he's scheduled to give. Sarah?
And Dan, we are hearing the Trump administration coming out to claim that there was an imminent attack being planned by Soleimani. Tell me any details as yet as to what that may have been.
Well, that's something that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said is one of the reasons for why attack now, right? There are counterterrorism experts who say whenever you can spot Soleimani and you're sure he's in a convoy, that's when you strike from the air. That's what happened in Baghdad. But again, this claim from Pompeo that there was an imminent attack that Soleimani was working on, some U.S. officials say it would have been kidnappings of U.S. citizens in Iraq. Beyond that, we don't have details, Sarah.
And Dan, tell me, is there serious concern that retaliation by Iran could actually mean terror attacks in the U.S., in America?
Well, I'd say, again, experts are thinking that most of the retaliation is likely in the Middle East. And it could be against Saudi Arabia and Israel, and certainly against Americans, both civilians and military, in Iraq and other countries. But here in the United States, yes, we're hearing from police, for instance, in New York City, that they have stepped up patrols at strategic locations. And this being Friday night, we understand that that includes the Sabbath, Shabbat, around Jewish places of worship. Of course, as it is, there had been a wave of anti-Semitic attacks in the New York area in the past 2 weeks. Sarah?
Certainly. And Dan, tell us, with this deployment of troops to the Middle East, what more can you tell us about that, and do we know where they're being deployed to?
Right. First of all, there's a really big irony. Apparently, 3,000 American troops are being sent into the Middle East because in recent months, President Trump was proud that he's winding down the U.S. military presence in that region and ending the war in Syria and beating ISIS. And now he's sending more troops in. We understand that the staging point will be Kuwait, right? Some U.S. Marines have already moved from Kuwait to Baghdad to protect the U.S. embassy. And beyond that, thousands of U.S. soldiers are on standby in case conflict does erupt. Because again, here in the United States, I have to say officials are not ruling out that Iran may decide to do something stupid. As Trump officials would put it, Iran may decide to attack the U.S. military, though again, experts feel that terrorism is the more likely response from Iran and its surrogates. Sarah?
And finally, Dan, tell us, where does this all leave the future of the Iran nuclear deal, which, as we know, is really on its last legs?
Yes, but Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China, they are still signatories. It's the U.S. that walked away. And France, in fact, has condemned what the United States did, saying that it makes the world more volatile, in effect more dangerous, because the U.S. took out Soleimani. So the U.S. disagrees. So we've got the same old disagreement. Donald Trump decided to act on his own. There's certainly support from Israel. We understand the Saudis are happy enough, but everyone's hunkering down in case there is a violent response from the Iranians and their allies.
And it certainly will be very interesting to hear what US President Trump has to say when indeed he does decide to speak. Thank you so much, Dan Raviv there in DC.
Sure.
And we are going out for a short break, but when we come back, we'll look into the security situation in Israel's north as the country braces for retaliation following the killing of Qassem Soleimani. Stay with us.
Let's now take a look at what is on the cutting edge.
Israel draws and attracts companies globally.
We have a technological revolution that has really changed a lot of people's lives.
People come with a lot of passion to create. It simply drives the business.
We can actually change the world.
We're on the inside of political and religious passions in Jerusalem.
Breaking down the financial trends shaping the global economy.
Giving you key context, not just headlines.
With the stories from Israel that touch the U.S.
and those across this region with impact far beyond its borders. Join us on The Rundown, where the Middle East meets the world.
The Middle East. I24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the I24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I24 News, see beyond.
You're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
One of the key issues in this election is women's rights. Sometimes the best gifts come in the ugliest packages.
You don't grow without dips and valleys. If it's always like that, then how do you ever learn?
Well, I think the world has changed. Israel's going to have that leading edge.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's now go back to the killing of Soleimani, with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards not only threatening the United States but also Israel in the wake of the assassination. Israel remains on high alert, with the Quds Force saying the US's strike will open a new chapter in the path of anti-Zionism resistance. Now, this is Israel's interim defence minister, Naftali Bennett, held an emergency security briefing earlier on Friday at the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip, has offered sincere condolences to the leadership of Iran, condemning the US for, quote, sowing and spreading discord in the region in service of the criminal Zionist enemy. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Regev was in the northern Israel today.
The Israeli security establishment is closely looking at all of the arenas around Israel, understanding that a possible retaliation for the killing of Qassem Soleimani could come from one of the Iranian proxies in Syria, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, or from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Despite that, there's no change in the civilian routine all over the country. Here in northern Israel, where we are, the army even initially lifted the only restriction that was applied on Friday. That was the closure of the ski resort on Mount Hermon on the Syrian border. Despite that, the management of the resort decided for now to keep it closed and perhaps open it only after further assessments and weather permitting. Of course, that will be decided probably during Saturday. And of course, Israel is not the only one preparing for a possible retaliation from Iran. So does the United States. The Pentagon approved to send more than 3,000 additional U.S. soldiers to the area, as there are many American assets in the region which could come under attack as part of the Iranian retaliation. There are American bases, installations, embassies, of course. The U.S. wants to make sure that all those installations are as safe as possible. Jonathan Regev, I24 News.
Now, as we've been reporting, tensions between the US and Iran continue to escalate, with violent protests, airstrikes, and now the killing of Iran's top military leader. But how did we get here? Before that, let's go live to the US, where Trump is speaking.
Diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him. Under my leadership, America's policy is unambiguous to terrorists who harm or intend to harm any American. We will find you. We will eliminate you. We will always protect our diplomats, service members, all Americans, and our allies. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its ruthless Quds Force under Soleimani's leadership, has targeted, injured, and murdered hundreds of American civilians and servicemen. The recent attacks on U.S. targets in Iraq, including rocket strikes that killed an American and injured 4 American servicemen very badly, as well as a violent assault on our embassy in Baghdad, were carried out at the direction of Soleimani. Soleimani made the death of innocent people his sick passion, contributing to terrorist plots as far away as New Delhi and London. Today we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over. Soleimani has been perpetrating acts of terror to destabilize the Middle East for the last 20 years. What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago. A lot of lives would have been saved. Just recently, Soleimani led the brutal repression of protesters in Iran, where more than 1,000 innocent civilians were tortured and killed by their own government. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war. I have deep respect for the Iranian people. They are a remarkable people with an incredible heritage and unlimited potential. We do not seek regime change. However, the Iranian regime's aggression in the region, including the use of proxy fighters to destabilize its neighbors, must end, and it must end now. The future belongs to the people of Iran, those who seek peaceful coexistence and cooperation, not the terrorist warlords who plunder their nation to finance bloodshed abroad. The United States has the best military by far anywhere in the world. We have the best intelligence in the world. If Americans anywhere are threatened, we have all of those targets already fully identified, and I am ready and prepared to take whatever action is necessary. And that in particular refers to Iran. Under my leadership, we have destroyed the ISIS territorial caliphate. And recently, American Special Operations Forces killed the terrorist leader known as al-Baghdadi. The world is a safer place without these monsters. America will always pursue the interests of good people, great souls, while seeking peace, harmony, and friendship with all of the nations of the world. Thank you. God bless you. God bless our great military, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, you say you do this.
President Trump there speaking from Palm Beach in Florida following the assassination of Soleimani. And for more, let's now go to Camellia Intek Habafad, who's the editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian in New York. Camellia, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We just heard the president speaking there, and Soleimani really had somewhat of a celebrity status in Iran. Tell me, how are people there taking this? We're already seeing anti-US protests happening in the street.
Thank you very much for hosting me. Iran is like the other Middle Eastern nation. It's a mix of the differences between the government and between the people and the real aims. We could say the people who are protesting in the city in Iran are people supporting the regime, or they have some interest with them. But among of the many Iranians today, I am hearing they have fears. They have the fears which this retaliation also aimed the Iranians, the public, and they have fears that it caused the military would take the power. They saw to seize the power. there is an election, parliamentary election within a couple of weeks, and they believe there might be the more hardliner people to be appointed in the parliament, and in a year coming up presidential election, more militant face close to the supreme leader to be elected. And all of those changes may put more pressure on the Iranian people, and which they are so much fearful. And what President Trump, even they said now, he is not after the regime change, just to change the behavior of the regime. But changing their behaviors maybe is so pricey, so costly, and even most of the regional countries too, from Afghanistan to Lebanon and to Syria and also Iraq, they will believe their ground shouldn't be the battleground between Iran and the U.S. and have the fears.
And Camelia, tell me, what do you make of what the president just came out to say, saying that the U.S. took action last night to stop a war, not to start a war? It does seem pretty likely that there will be some pretty tough consequences happening across the Middle East.
The act of President Trump last night was a declaration of a war, but Mr. Soleimani was the second person, not in rank, but in reality in Iran. After the supreme leader, he was in charge of Iran foreign policy and Iran military inside and outside the country. So we could say a very important character in the system has been assassinated. So that can be a declaration of war, but today the classical war has a different meaning and different approaches than the one which has been remembered. They don't need to have the troops. They don't need to really attack each other's souls. But Iran has their proxy militia in the region who can make the retaliation. And I believe that at the beginning of this program,
Camelia, we're going to have to leave it there because we're nearly out of time, but really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And that is all we have time for. Thanks for watching.